Like, no one else in my life is fine with me because they're humans. I'm not. I created all of you. I'm okay. I'm like, God. So he said, just don't forget that. But the one thing you could do and I can do to help facilitate that classroom setting between our time with God is don't hold on to murmurings or disputings. Don't hold on to the ways we talk about people or think about people, and don't hold on to grumblings. Don't hold on to being your frustrations. Boy, is that convicting to me. The frustrations part is big time convicting to me. Murmurings a little bit, because some people do irritate me at times when they continue to do the same things and not stop, and they do it again and again and again. That's irritating. Yeah, so the murmuring things hits me in that way, but the grumblings or disputing things hits me more from the sense of, yeah, it's that whole thing is just it's hard. So he says in verse 15, he says, so that you, here goes the way in which I know the salvation he's talking about in verse 12 is about the soul, the last one, number 8 for the day 8, to be the bride. Because he says in verse 15, so that, all that's because, so that, why do we have salvation, fear, trembling? Why is it important to know God's benevolence is plural? Why is it important not to do murmuring, disputing, ongoing? So that you may be blameless ones. Amemptoi, which is mature ones in day 7, blameless. But he goes on to say, and anakreos, which is pure and untainted, as in unblemished, as in unstained garment. Children of God, irreproachable. There it is. Amemptos, or mempta. This is irreproachable, as in the bride in day 8. That's why you work out your salvation with fear and trembling. That's why it's important to know God always loves you fresh and renewed. That's why you don't murmur and grumble. That's why. Because what's at stake? So that. Do you really want to go into day 7 with the right mindset as being the 60-fruit mature person at the very minimum? Do you? Do you really want to make sure you maintain your garment unblemished and unstained? Do you? Because what's at stake is the irreproachable status at the end, amemptos. That's what he's talking about. So he says here, and he goes, and you're doing this, but he tells you, he's admitting it's in the midst of a crooked, which is the word perverse, which is the word scolios. We got a word scoliosis from that, a curvature of the spine, right? So they're curving and twisting God's word and their view of him. Misguided, which means they distort, diastrepho, they distort God's word. We have the dominant sense of Christianity doing that. If that's not irritating enough. Then he says, not how they believe, just how they act as well. And among you appear, and among whom you, me, we appear, we bring to light as luminaries in the world. God. So we're supposed to be, in light of all that, a light. Really? When sometimes you want to be a flaming torch of, right? No. Don't be like James and John. Burn fire on the city. No. Be a light. Okay.
Speaking about James and the inoffensive, that we're none of the bridle.
Yeah, believe me, I have problems. I got issues, man. I got issues. I got all kinds of issues. The bridle, yeah, the tongue.
The Lord will fight for you while you. I keep that in mind with the situation with the sister. I'm not saying anything that ain't relevant.
Yeah. Sometimes I know. I just want to have my tongue cut out sometimes, but. So in verse 16 he says, exhibiting the word of life. Exhibiting, which is epecho, which is to take heed, to hold fast to the word of life. To the word of life, as into the word of life, as into God, to Christ himself. For my exaltation in the day of Christ, that I did not run in vain and labor in vain. So he did not run into, it says into a day of Christ, he did not into vain run, nor into vain toil. And the word toil means here to be ekkopeo. So peo means to work, and ekpeo means out of the work I'm exhausted. I didn't work to the point of exhaustion for nothing. I'm not in prison for nothing. There's no way now I'm going to lose sight of what's at stake. You've got to be out your mind. This is the last part of my ministry. I'm now in Caesarea's prison being transported to Rome. And you actually think that I'm going to start acting wrong, thinking wrong, and turning on Christ. I don't care how many times they're with me. Ain't going to happen. Never going to happen. He's like, no, I'm not doing this for nothing. That makes everything I did. Then they've won twice. Then the abuser and the prosecutor of my soul and of my body has won twice. Because they've hurt me now, and they have hurt me in my future. I'm not going to let them have it. I'm not doing it. They may take from me now my joy on this earth from not having these scars I have scars that they brought to me physically and spiritually and emotionally, Paul's saying. But they're not going to take from me my rewards. I'm not letting it happen. Because my biggest reward is being with Christ. I'm longing to be the best closeness I could possibly be to him and be the most pleasing I can be to him. I'm going to let those things, I'm going to use those things to help me be better prepared for that. I'm not going to resent them. I'm going to embrace them. He's not going to do it in vain. Remember, we said this before, the pains, the abuse, the anguish in your life is not to be something to be angry about. It's to embrace it and use it for your betterment so that you don't let it win twice. It already beat you the first time when it made you feel bad. And it already beats us ongoing when it makes us continually feel bad about ourselves or feel lowly of ourselves. Just don't let that do. Use it for your strength, because then it only has one minor victory now. And that it won a battle at one point in your life. But win the war now by letting it be infused in what can make you better. And also win the ultimate war later, when now that ultimate closeness with Christ and his blessings is what you experience through embracing all that hardship of hellacious suffering. And that's why it's not in vain. Don't let it be for nothing. So he says in verse 17, but even if I be poured out, he's going into more, pour out a libation on the sacrifice and public service of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all, and for this be you also glad and rejoice with me. Now I don't know about you, and he said, by the way, it's the public service of the faith, the works of you. He says, if I'm poured out. In other words, it brings me to mind, one of my favorite movies is the true story of this Braveheart. And I remember watching it. I love watching these true stories about history. And he Braveheart, and they're gutting him. They're disemboweling him. They lay him on a concrete slab, and they disembowel him. That's what the famous thing you see people make fun of in media and on newspapers and other things. And they say, freedom! That's where they're getting that from. That's the last thing he screamed, because he never would bow to the king, never would acknowledge England as a Scottish man. They were pulling his bowels out. They're disemboweling him, and he would not relent. He would not bow down. And his last words were freedom. He said, fine, you can kill me. This is just the life that will come and go. But my soul will live on in freedom. And that inspired them to finally come together as Scottish and have their freedom. So it's amazing, and it just moves me. Think about how God used that one man, William Wallace. And I actually met an ancestor of his here in Lake Mary, Florida, actually. He lives up in Lake Mary. He's like an ancestor. His name is actually William Wallace. It's like, I go, you're that? And he goes, yeah, I am related. It's weird. But I just know that true story is like amazing. Paul's saying, in a spiritual sense, I don't care what they do to me. In his case, he was beheaded. They could do their worst. Nothing. Even if I'm poured out. In other words, if they gut him and disembowel his blood out of his very veins over an altar of sacrifice, if they treat him as if he's the lamb, if he's the beast of sacrifice, if he's the oxen, doesn't matter what he is. He said, I could be like a sacrificial animal to the altar. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to relent and recant for your benefit. Wow. For my benefit. For Christ's benefit. It's just amazing to me. He's talking about, no matter how bad it gets here, nothing will sway him from staying the course. He says in verse 19, but I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy. I hope, elapizo, I expect, to send Timothy to you shortly, that I also may be animated when I ascertain. The word animated is have a good soul. Upashukok, uposek, I can't even say this word. Upsetio, a good soul. That I'm also may be a good soul when I ascertain how things are with you. So he's saying, I'm going to have, and that word there is episukeo, which is this good soul. He's going to send, I'm going to be of good life, knowing that I'm going to send you this man that I know is like a second self to me. He's going to go on and talk about Timothy in a second here. He says, watch this, for I have no one, which is the ongoing use for ongoing possession, for I have no one like souled. Wow. I have no one like souled, disposed, who will really care about your affairs. And that word is, I have no one who is, again, really, sincerely care. Miriamo, no one who will genesios, sincerely, miramao, and care of the whole piece of you, not just one part of you, but the whole of the parts. I have no one else who will care about you in your affairs. What a thing to be said about you as a young man tutored by Paul. That not only is your head where it needs to be and understanding what he's given you, that you're able to teach, but the way in which you teach from your heart, you got it. You got it. You're sincere, and you care about the parts of that person, every aspect of them. Wow. And so he says in verse 21, for all are seeking their own things, not the things of Christ. Wow. And that word seeking is the word zeteo. In other words, they're investigating. They're investigating everything else but Christ. Oh, look over here about this information I've learned about such and so, or about this and that or the other. No matter what it is, whether it's about science, biology, politics, math, your life, and cars, and whatever. You know, there's so much in this life to learn about. Art, plants, trees, I don't know. There's so much to learn about. There's so much you can learn. Any subject will take you on a lifelong journey. Medical, right? He's like, why are you investigating all those things, but no one's talking about Christ? No one's doing that same effort to Christ. That's what he says in verse 21. For all are seeking their own things and not the things of Christ. Why aren't you investigating the things that God gave you? Why are you taking so much time how to make tents, how to do tax collecting, how to traverse the right path to go from Galilee to Judea? Would you stop it? How to fish, how to sail, how to boat, how to merchandise, how to transverse this, how to make purple dye. Would you stop? Would you investigate Christ? He gave you so much. Investigate that. I don't understand why you don't do that.
Cares for this world.
Yeah, that's what he's talking about. Yes. Sorry.
Todd said, Paul is saying that only Timothy is like soul, correct?
Yes, he's saying only Timothy has the same mindset, but also the same heart, the same soul, the same life of compassion that Paul has. He shares that same depth that Paul has of caring about these people in Philippi. But that's because of their tight-knit relationship. Other folks have a similarity to this, but not the same depth that they share. They share a uniqueness of likeness. Because I think it goes back to this, because he's about to say it in verse 22. But of him you know the proof, or this is the dikome, or the tried character, that as a father or a child with a father, he served me. And that word for served me is that he's been a subjected servant. It says ekdulo. So he has been subjected to me as a mentee. So Paul's telling you why he's like sold is because no one else has been like a child to a father to me like he has. No one. Not like him. Of all the people I've mentored, this guy's different. Because you know why? He was the first one. That's why. He was the first one from his bad experience of his bad behavior with John Mark. And he put everything into Timothy. And boy, was he rewarded for that. And seeing a man who not just grew in mind, but this young man grew into a man with his heart as well in the right place. And Paul's talking about this. So it's pretty amazing to see that. He says he's dikome, he tried the character. In verse 23, in him therefore I hope to send immediately or at once, whenever I see distinctly through things concerning me. So he says that by the way, when he says, and in verse 23, when he says, him therefore I hope to send immediately at once whenever I see, the word there I see is the word aphroao, which means phorao means to look at, and means away from, looking away from. So Paul means to look away from everything else he's focused in on. In other words, him therefore I hope to send immediately whenever I focus in on distinctly the things concerning me. In other words, Paul's saying when I eliminate everything else and I focus on what God has put me through, I look so forward to knowing that he's the next best thing to physically having me there is having him there. I just focus on imagining what that's like for him to be there, as if he's the continuation of my truth and my presence amongst you, and how he's going to not just teach you, but conduct himself amongst you. He has my same spirit in me that God put in me, God put in him. That's what he's talking about. And having confidence, he says in verse 24, the same word used in verse 1 and 6, I'm fully persuaded that God will continue. He's persuaded by faith in the Lord that I also myself will come shortly. Interesting that he says he's persuaded that he'll come shortly to be there. This is a proof text that Paul himself didn't know the future. He never made it back to Philippi, did he? He died. He went to Rome and he died. Many debate, he wrote this letter from, Rome or Caesarea. They debated, but this makes it clear he was in Caesarea because he was thinking when he left Caesarea maybe there was a chance he can go to Rome or get released. But no, obviously when he got there, it was the end. It was the end. And so in this case, you have him saying that he thought he was going to be back in Philippi to see him again. That never happened. It's unfortunate. But he says in verse 25, I esteemed, again, there's that esteeming. So he's going to, again, have the leading thought in his mind be that it is necessary, however, to send to you I can't even say this. Epaphroditus. Epaphroditus. There's another, by the way, not a slouch. He's just not as close to him as Timothy was, or in the same mindset, but he's still good guy, greatly astute person. Watch this. He says, Epaphroditus, the brother of me, he says, my fellow workman. That means he had firsthand experience of the understanding and experiences that Paul went through. So when he says fellow worker, he had fellow understanding. He says fellow soldier, he had fellow experiences. In other words, with Epaphroditus, he had a similar understanding, a fellow worker, a sunageros, but he also he's a fellow soldier, so he experienced the same hardships, the same sufferings. So it's one thing to say, I understand what you understand. It's quite another to say, I've had the same suffering of koinonia fellowship with you. So he talks to him so a fellow soldier, by default, is a person who's soon koinoi with you. They suffer with you. That's why in military points today, people, whether they're men or women, when they serve together and they go through a battle together, they're brothers or sisters for life. They just are, right? So when he says, but he says here, but your apostle and a need. So he's my fellow workman and my fellow soldier, but your apostle and a minister for my need. The minister for my need, the word Korea means my need, but he says your apostle. Remember, the word apostle is used of the 12 apostles, Judas replaced by Paul, so anybody appointed by the resurrected Lord, and those who were appointed by the apostles directly. Remember, Barnabas was called an apostle. So in this case, Paul appointed Epaphroditus as an apostle. So he appointed him, so that's why he's an apostle. Not that he's another addition to the 12, like our Mormon friends want to say there's ongoing apostles, and our Church of Christ or Pentecostal folks want to say there's ongoing apostles. No, there's not. No, there's not. You're appointed by Christ, the resurrected Christ, personally, or you're appointed by one of those 12 personally. Can that be done anymore? No. So there's no more apostles. It's done. So that's why in this case he's a second-tier apostle. He was an apostle by indirect representation as an ambassador on behalf of an apostle. In this case, Paul appointed him as such. He says, since he was longing, or if indeed he was, this is really interesting. This shows you why, even though Epaphroditus is a great guy, he's about to tell you why Timothy was earlier being sent to him. But Epaphroditus went through some other physical hardships and mental hardships that it actually was killing him. It was mentally and physically taking his life, and he's going to tell you that in a minute here. He says, if indeed he was longing after you, he was much depressed. That is adimanio, which he was distressed. He lacked courage. He had a troubled spirit because you heard that he was sick. Meaning he didn't want you to know. He didn't want you to know he was sick. For indeed he was sick near to death. He was sick. He was weak. He was asthenenio. He was weak and feeble. He was near to death, meaning he was at the doorsteps. He was in the moments or days before death. He was going to die. The man was mentally afflicted, physically near death. Emotionally distraught, physically near death. For in verse 27, for indeed if he was sick near to death, but God pitied him. God, Elio, brought mercy. His internal disposition, exercised externally, is Elio, mercy, pitied him. And not him only, but me also. Paul said that God did it not just to heal Epaphroditus, but also to help Paul, to not be having sorrow upon sorrow, he says, but to me also, so I might have sorrow upon sorrow. The sorrow upon sorrow Paul is talking about, of course, is he's gone through enough emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. He doesn't want to see one of his good friends, his fellow worker, his fellow soldier die. No, don't do that. So it's encouraging to Paul. So God did it for Epaphroditus, but he also did it to encourage Paul, to not have him lose one of these guys that he's, been used to mentor in Christ. and the deeper things of the Word of God, who's been there with him through battles. Physically, when it comes to being afflicted. Verse 28, I have sent him therefore the more speedily. I have sent him therefore the more speedily, meaning with much diligence and zeal. I sent him to you, so that seeing, that means aido, in other words, you would see him again, that you may rejoice. And that I may be less sorrowful. As in less sorrowful, as in, remember Acts 24 and 25, is when he was in prison with Felix and Festus, I mentioned earlier. It's less sorrowful to know that there's so many people that hate him, that want him dead. It would bring him much sorrow to know that one of the people he loves is dying. And he's dying not only from emotionally being heartbroken, but now physically being near death. That would just break Paul's heart. And so Paul said his restoration by God through his life near the doorsteps of death was not just for his benefit, but it also blessed me to have less sorrow. People say, oh, you're supposed to always have a smile on your face and praise Jesus. So when Paul says he's rejoicing, it doesn't mean he doesn't have moments of sorrow. It means he is experiencing sorrow, but it chooses the state of joy in his sorrow. So, because both are true, you see him say it. You may rejoice, that I may be less sorrowful. Earlier, chapter 1, he says, I'm going to ongoingly rejoice in his state of sorrow. So don't mistake the fact that people who would say, put a little Jesus on it. No. In a state of being sorrowful, that is a genuine state to be in, and not be a sinning, depressing fool. Come on, that's being normal. If the situation dictates it, you could be in a state of sorrow because of pain afflicted upon you that never leaves you, but how you adjust to it with a state of joy. You're in a state of sorrow, but you choose to ongoingly be in joy, using that sorrow to be thankful to God and how it's bringing you closer to Him, understanding about His Word, seeing yourself differently, and so forth. It's how you receive it, how you perceive it. The pain is still there, the sorrow is still there, but Paul is perceiving it and choosing to receive it in a way as a blessing from God. It doesn't go away, just how you receive it differently. In verse 29, speaking of receiving, the last two verses, receive Him then in the Lord. Receive Him. In other words, pros edekoma. In other words, it's a warm embrace. Receive, but pros, receive from, close to. In other words, a warm welcome. And he says, with all joy, charos, plural, joy, plural. It should say, receive Him in the Lord with all joy. It brings that image in my mind when someone gives you a hug and just goes, oh man, man, I missed you, man. Missed you, man. There's that old tight hug and that continual, there's that, it's an ongoing, that's what he's talking about. Please let him know. Please let him know. The warm embrace. Because of his new lease on life, and not just that your love for Him is such ever present to remind Him of how much He makes you happy because of God's love in His life towards you and God's sustaining grace to provide Him a new lease on life. But then He's also been the one who's been teaching you and been loving you, and He Himself is in need of that right now. He just came off of death's doorstep. Embrace Him wholeheartedly. Embrace this guy. And such like persons in honor. In other words, there's other people like him. Do the same thing to them too. Embrace them bubbling over with joy. A tight hug, ongoing charos, joys. Bubbling over, embrace. Not just an embrace, a tight embrace. I'm bubbling over like, woohoo, it's so glad to see you. Like a soldier coming home from Vietnam. A soldier who came back from PTSD. Hug on him. So much, you just, oh man. So thankful that you're here. Just love seeing you again. And do it to everyone like him, he says. But do it, he says, like persons in honor. That means do it with, not with playtime, not with fakeness, but with high respect and value. Treat that as precious. That's a precious moment. That's the word he's using, etimos. And honor, etimos, with respect, with value. See the preciousness of that situation, of God's life in that person in that moment that He's given both of you to have that embrace. And he says, lastly, because on account of the work of Christ, this is amazing. He was near to death. He put His life in harm's way. He hazarded Himself so that He might fill up the remainder of your ministry to me. The plural ministry is they would on the public. It means the public service. So he says plural. So He was ongoingly and physically and spiritually always there to encourage me, putting Himself in harm's way, meaning He went through Roman guard that they could have easily seized him and killed him. He himself was physically drained, but still made his way to me. This guy is remarkable. He was weak in the knees. He was physically not at his best. He was mentally distraught. And he went through a garrison of Roman people, a hatred of Jewish crowd, to make his way to me. I love this man. You don't understand what he did for me. That's different than Timothy. They're two different people, both unique in their own way. No slouch on either side of here. He's sending them, both of these guys. What a wonderful way to have these bookends of two men. One guy that's been scarred emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, stared down death in the face. And God said, life is what I give to you. Epaphroditus was a bad boy, Jack. He was a man of courage and faith, and he was just like, wow. He was a man's man. Whereas Timothy, he was just this young kid growing up into this great man. This great man who became a man of good heart, great mind and insight and intellect, and was like another Paul, a little mini Paul walking around. They both were loved by Paul for different reasons you can understand. Again, one like a father to a son, and one like a fellow soldier you went to battle with. You went to war with this guy, and he's always been there for you. Epaphroditus, he's my battle guy. Timothy, that's my son. That's like, come on. He's my soul. He loves both of them in different ways, but loves them both greatly. And he's sending those kind of people to Philippi because they need both of these different perspectives. For these last 2 chapters, he's talking about some things that are going to be pretty, as you know, on point about chapter 4, about having peace and about getting through things of contentment and satisfaction through different trials of life. But in chapter 3, about that great resurrection, he talks about the out-resurrection, right? Counting all things as dung and pressing on. So we'll look at that as we continue on in chapter 3 of Philippians. So let me stop here. We went over again, as I tend to do. My apologies. So let's stop and pray and conclude our time today in our study. So Father, we thank you for this time today we've had. Thank you for your ongoing insight and love and encouragement you give to us. Thank you for all that you have continued to show and bestow upon us in love and forgive. And just every day be fresh and renewed, not agitated with us, not irritated with us, not frustrated with us, even though that's what I would think, that's what I do. Please forgive me of doing that to myself, to others, and to be like you. A spirit of fresh renewal of compassion, fresh renewal of just love and concern and consolation for helping to get through the understanding as to what's needed to continue to grow with this, what's at stake that you've given us, and to be able to live up to that measure of so much grateful and gratitude for what you've given and what you out ahead are still holding out for us. So thank you, Father, for your love, for your provision, and just for your sustaining grace and peace. We ask you to continue to be with us throughout the week, bring us back together safely. In Jesus, Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. I will tell you on Friday, by